Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development for the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana. We're here at 318 Latino Studios for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. And I'll tell you this, I'm about to learn a lot, and you're about to learn a lot. We actually have a really special discussion today. Our guest is Rachel Fischer, and then my friend is here to guide me and to help me stay out of the weeds, Verni Howard. Thank y'all so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Well, I'll get started. Rachel, so you're a critical part of one of the largest and most ambitious citywide cleanup efforts in Shreveport's history, the City of Shreveport Block by Block initiative. And so my first question for you today is just, how did you first come to be involved in this project?
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite questions because that's how I got here. And it's kind of serendipitous because I think it ended up feeling a lot different to actually be here than that process to get here. So the program that I'm a part of, the Bloomberg Harvard Summer Fellowship, there's a longer title probably, they select students who are in the middle of their master's programs or have recently completed a master's program to go help in cities or actually around the globe with issues that are important to their mayor. And so there's kind of a matching process for students who are interested in cities in terms of what their needs are. And this was a good fit for me, and it was a good fit for Shreveport, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think at the time, I was kind of just looking for a summer job and a place to grow my experience and kind of get to know a new place. And it's been so much more than that. So I'm really grateful that it worked out.
And tomorrow you leave. When did you first arrive?
Yes, I do leave tomorrow, unfortunately. I first arrived on June 4th.
Okay.
And I didn't start, I think I arrived on June 4th, but I didn't start until the following week. I arrived a week before my actual fellowship, so I've been here 11 weeks.
Okay.
Fellowship term is 10 weeks.
Okay, and today's August 15th for everyone who's listening to this, and this will publish in about a week. And Verni, I know you were going to kind of give a little background too and context.
Sure, because the importance of Rachel's arrival to our city really folds in so nicely with this whole block by block initiative, which is an initiative of our mayor. And, most people know, some don't, that Mayor Arceneaux was a part of this Bloomberg experience and had an opportunity to apply for this city initiative. And he thought, well, let's give it a try. And fortunately, he was selected. And so Rachel's presence here is a result, it really stemmed from 30 community leaders across the city of Shreveport kind of coming together to talk about one thing that's important to our mayor, and that's blight elimination. And so from that there were 7 of us who spent from November of 2024 until July of this year not studying blight, but studying hard issues. And how do you begin to talk about blight elimination in a city like Shreveport, where there's a lot of blight? There have been a lot of plans that have sat on lots of shelves. Lots of people have tried it. But what Harvard taught us was, how do you take a complex issue? We were sitting with people from all over the world, and that's what I loved about the process. Sometimes we don't know how critical information sharing is. So we were sitting, for us in Shreveport, what was really interesting, we sat with a group from Freiburg, Germany, and they had the same issue. It was blight elimination. So what does blight look like in Freiburg versus blight in Shreveport? And what we learned is, blight is blight, and how we define it and what it means to us. So for the 7 of us that carried on this mission for 9+ months, we learned how to take complex issues and break them down and bring all of those case studies that we read night after night and studied week after week to our city to really say data and information informs how we begin this block by block, process. And so Rachel's fit, and the reason I've been so honored to get to know you, Rachel has really taken this big issue, stepped into a city and worked with kind of that, I think, what's the core. And we have blight because we don't have strong code enforcement. So you can have a landlord who chooses not to pay the water bill and tenants have to be relocated, and you have this big, ugly building in the center of your city. And sometimes that's the beginning of blight. So Rachel, in working with property standards, really walked into this space where you thought you were just doing a summer job, right? And then you met a group of people, the 7 of us, and then the bigger city. And what I'm guessing you probably gleaned from all of that, this is not just 7 people or a city or 30 leaders or 100 volunteers who just come together on a weekend to pick up trash. But it's a group of people who've dedicated time, energy, resources to make sure that Shreveport is a better city. Absolutely. And so you're being a part of that and a part of the Harvard family. The wealth that you bring to us and the wealth that you leave is really this platform for us to move blight by blight, block by block, and blight elimination. So that connectivity is so critical.
And I'm going to just, because I didn't really do it, just Verni, for those of you who don't know, was the executive director of Providence House for how many years?
For 9.5 years.
9.5 years, and she's now the director of community development for the city of Shreveport. Is that the correct title?
That's correct. Sometimes it vacillates because I forget too, but that's right. So, director of community service, community development for the city of Shreveport. So this type of initiative is so important in the type of work, because I've seen poverty and blight and what those two things blended together can mean. So with that, while we're talking about block by block, and I know a lot of people in our community have heard block by block and don't really understand it, talk a little bit about block by block. Talk a little bit about the initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'll also just add that the degree that I just completed was my master in urban planning. And I focused on environment, climate, and health. And I came to learn that aside code enforcement, blight intersects with so many different things. And I didn't initially see why my background in environment or health would help with that, but it's so clear. And I think I've really gotten to use my people-focused skills that I've cultivated from just my past work experience. I worked as a college counselor for a while, and then also mixing that a little bit with my own interest in community development, economic development, urban planning. That being said, the Block by Block initiative, I can speak a little bit to it.
Sure.
But I will also say that I purposefully I think my work was embedded within the Block by Block initiative for the summer, but I was purposefully trying to use it as a tool to learn more about people's reactions to it and to learn about people's relationship to what we were saying with Block by Block and use it for me as a tool. I think Verni and the team were really instrumental in getting that off the ground and seeing that. And I kind of, I came right in, so I was pulled into it, and I don't know if I planned it, but it was really great to be out there with the community. So what Block by Block is at least from my perspective, is, and maybe it's helpful for people to hear, because my perspective is probably a lot of other community members' perspective. It's an initiative to reframe how we think about blight instead of dilapidation, distressed properties. Instead, what's the path forward? So it's neighborhood preservation, it's revitalization, it's what do we want, not what do we not like, what do we not want. And so Block by Block is a series of, my understanding, engagement initiatives or ways of engaging the community with how they want to reimagine their communities, their neighborhoods, and doing that on a really small scale so that it's really specific to individual needs, histories, cultures, people who are living in by neighborhood or block by block.
Let me interrupt one second. Is block by block a known initiative? Like, is that something that exists in other places, or is that a Shreveport specific initiative?
It's a Shreveport specific initiative. We were very conscious about what we called it, and we wanted to make sure that the initiative the name reflected the intentionality of the initiative. And so revitalizing our community block by block.
Right.
So.
Right. And I think it transformed a little bit. There were other names that were used in the past, but this was really putting the vision forward of what we want to see as revitalized, happy, thriving blocks. So that's my perspective. And a lot of people think block by blocks are synonymous with the clean sweeps that were going on. And the clean sweeps is just one way. And it's a great way to start this initiative. But my understanding is that this is block by block as a larger priority of the administration of the city of Shreveport. And the clean sweeps are the way to start getting people out there, to start getting people talking, to start I can speak from my perspective, like being out with the mayor, with Verni, with Marcus Edwards, who's my main supervisor in this role, who's the city attorney, being out with his kids, people that I met who live across the street, and all being out there together and walking together and asking what is the experience here? Where did this litter come from? Where did the tires come from? How do you feel about it? What do you like about being here? And just being outside is such a great way to start thinking about, okay, what's the path forward?
And which brings me exactly to my next question. So my question is, if you're part of the community and have never seen one of these, what do one of the 11 clean sweeps look like? Like paint a picture and kind of put someone who hasn't participated in one of these on the street alongside you.
Sure.
And let them feel and
Absolutely.
see what you're
Yeah.
feeling and seeing.
Yes, and if you're working 8 to 5 with the city most days, it's you wake up on a Friday as if you're going to work. So I would say it's a Saturday morning, 7 a.m. You're waking up, you're drinking your coffee, you're putting on probably pants that you don't mind getting a little dirty, and then going out, meeting the team. Shreveport Green has been really integral to this initiative. In fact, I think they just applied for an award with the city and they won. So congrats. What is it? Keep Louisiana Beautiful or something,
Louisiana Beautiful, that's
which
right.
is an excellent, yay. But so big shout out to them because they're doing a lot of this legwork too. So the reason I mention it, you show up on site and they have these great yellow vests that all of the cleaners put on, these fun grabbers, trash bags, community. There's music oftentimes. Somebody's made a breakfast for some, community members brought something. Then there's people gathering from across the city. There's people gathering, politicians, community members, church leaders, community leaders, nonprofit leaders, all kind of coming together. I think most of the sweeps we started with some prayer to set our intentions, to set our togetherness, our unified force, and just be together in that moment and focus on what's important. And then we get cleaning. There's also
And each one is in a different neighborhood.
each one is
so-
exactly.
That's right.
And then there's also people, city officials, property standards we mentioned, going around in their cars, making note of things or fixing things on the spot when
So
they
how
need
many
it.
people, just give me, so I have a sense, because I
Sure.
haven't unfortunately gotten to participate in one of these yet. How many people are participating in the actual sweep, or how many people are on the sweep team?
There are at least 60.
I would say
every,
so.
every single time.
Because you got your handful of cleaners, but then you also have many of the police force members are out, community-oriented policing, property standards, Department of Public Works folks, animal services, the parish, are all there driving around, taking note of things. I mean, this is also an opportunity for them to say, okay, we're going to do this on Saturday. We're going to go out all together, be seen, and we're going to, I was driving with, I think his name is Mr. Kelvin from the Animal Services in the Caddo Parish, and he was telling me about just like horse regulations and when we were in, where was it, MLK, and I learned a lot from that, but that was an opportunity for him to go around, okay, let me see if there's new horses and what we need to do to help make sure the horses are doing well.
And you're knocking on doors?
Yeah,
do.
and so that's one of the things I love. Before we go out on a block by block walk, Shreveport Police Department will canvass the neighborhood, and they actually take the block by block survey, and they're knocking on doors saying, residents, take the survey so that the block by block committee will know what you want in your community. And I think
So this is in advance.
this is in advance.
this week.
Friday
That's
before,
right.
for example.
So this is not a and Rachel's done an amazing job describing it, because it does. It feels like community coming together. But the work part where we do the information gathering is through that survey. And the block by block executive team created a survey whereby we have a QR code. You can take a picture with your phone, and we are gathering data. We're gathering information so that community members can report back to us what they want in their community. And that's why block by block is so important. It is not what the mayor wants. It is not what community development wants. It's what the community wants.
It's not
And
top down. It's bottom up.
it is bottom.
Should be,
It is bottom up. And I think the most beautiful thing that comes out of these initiatives, every walk, the mayor and his wife and the executive team are there, and the mayor's knocking on doors and he's talking to people. And then when people see the mayor and the police and the fire department who installing fire alarms on a Saturday, the community begins to come out of their homes and they're saying, hey, what's going on here? And they're talking to the mayor from a community development standpoint. I'm taking pictures of roof lines. I'm taking pictures of broken stairs. I'm taking pictures of things that community development can support and pay for, all in this initiative, all while picking up tires that tire shops have dumped into our communities, making it ugly and bleak. And so this is not it's not a go out and take pretty pictures and eat snowballs and pick up litter. This is gathering information, figuring out how can we implement the plan that Rachel is leaving for our city to become clean. And we just have to do it block by block, because we didn't become blighted overnight, and we're not going to be able to resolve it overnight. So
It's also, I'll just add this one other thing that you kind of hit on, is it's an opportunity if you've had bulk trash or you have to get rid of something at that time, this is the day you could do it. We won't charge. You just leave it on the side of your road if you're in that neighborhood. So it's also a really good opportunity to just start over.
that's right.
And I know you brought in the city from Germany and compared our reference their blight, that their blight is not terribly dissimilar from our blight.
Sure.
Like, how do we, like, one thing we talk a lot about, you wouldn't know this, Verni would, but one thing we talk a lot about on this podcast is just kind of the overall self-esteem issue in Shreveport. And, the blight is part of that. So I'm just curious, and I don't know how much work you've done in this area, but I suspect the answer is a lot. How does Shreveport's blight compare to other similar sized cities across the U.S.? I mean, do most cities have blight issues? Is this a universal issue? And just should we feel good about how we rank and rate compared to other cities relative to blight?
Yeah.
I can try to answer that a little bit. I will say of the there's 21 or so fellows from Harvard dispersed across the world right now.
All to attack blight?
No, they're not all attacking blight, but I was going to say of those, a good amount of them are working on revitalizing their downtowns in Laredo, Texas. There's Winnipeg, Canada is working on a very similar blight distressed property situation. Memphis, Tennessee, I think is one of the key ones that is actually we can learn a lot just because of our proximity to them. I don't always like answering the question of like how do we rank in terms of blight, because I would say Winnipeg, Canada, even Laredo, Texas, or even Memphis, which is a little bit closer, are not Shreveport. They're not the same size. They don't have the same history. They don't have the same beautiful historic buildings that we have, which are worth thinking about and keeping and celebrating. And I say that for the reason of I don't know if that's the right question to ask, not to criticize the question, but I think it's always, as humans, we like to rank ourselves and know where we are, which is valid. But I think there's a lot of cities that are facing very similar things in different ways. Right. And their struggles look a little different than ours. If there's something that we need to do, then might be a little, I don't know. And I've been learning a lot from mentors who've worked in New Orleans. So I think nothing's quite like Shreveport, and that's also what makes it. That's what's made this opportunity really fun for me is like these peers that I have, like this is the warmest community, and I get to brag all the time when I'm on calls with them. Like they're like, I barely get through to anyone, and people aren't responding to my calls, and I'm like, okay, I can't really relate to that. Right. So we have that. I don't know if you have something.
And I do. I just add one key point. That was the whole purpose of the Harvard Initiative. We got to sit with city leaders who were lay people who were experiencing the same thing. And I'm going to tell you, blight in Shreveport looks no differently than blight in other places from the standpoint it is a big social issue. It takes everybody to resolve it, and the looming question is, how do we get started? And a lot of people, no matter where you are, will say, we've tried that already. We heard that in Shreveport. We've tried that. We've done that. But what's really happened is we've done versions of it without data to inform, without metrics to measure, without forming teams to come together to do it in a very strategic way. And that's really what the difference is. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. We've already done that. We have a blight elimination plan. No, you have words on paper, but they haven't gone through the engagement process. And it takes a long time to hear people's voices. And, sometimes you think, I'm picking up a tire. But what really a neighbor wants is, I want better sidewalks. Sometimes we're going and saying, let's cut down trees. And really the neighbors are saying, no, we need better lighting and better schools. So when you hear the voices of the block, the community that you serve, you respond to the needs of people. And so the beautiful thing in our case studies, they paired like cities with like initiatives with like needs purposely. And so Shreveport, people were looking at our plan saying, oh my God, we love that. And then people in other countries were, and we learned from them. And then the last thing I'll share is in the Harvard study, we created what's called a fishbone diagram because there are so many entry points to attack blight. And we know if you start with code enforcement and cleaning up things, that will precipitate some other fallout, like what community services do we have to provide? What are the other things? So it's not just do clean sweeps and we're done. It is attacking all those entry points to blight, poverty, lack of economic engines, those things. And so it's this is just like Rachel said, this is just the beginning of a very big process, but it will transform our city.
It's a comprehensive system redesign.
Absolutely.
And I guess to address your original question, I think if we continue comparing ourselves to other cities, then it's not going to be sustainable. Like that's what's unique about this block by block is that it's entrenched in Shreveport, and it's not Laredo, it's not Memphis, it's not Jackson, it's not Winnipeg, Canada.
And it's entrenched in Shreveport and what Shreveport needs. Yes,
but we're learning from them. We're saying, what did you do? Oh, that sounds interesting. We can try that thing. And in fact, for my study, what I did to analyze some of what I was seeing here is I actually learned from my friend in Evansville who decided to walk on her own a section of a street and categorize things in certain ways, similar to actually how Verni was describing she might do at the block by block, and start to just become systematic about it. I'm saying this because I learned I didn't say we are Evansville and we're worse or better or this or that, but I said, oh, that's an interesting way of doing that. Let's see if that works here. And it's helpful to have the little tools. Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say, both of you say, is that this is tailored and customized for Shreveport specifically.
Correct.
Absolutely. It not only is it tailored, it is led by the citizens of Shreveport. When people feel like I don't have a voice, it is only their voices that we are responding to. Right. So it's not top down, it's definitely bottom up. And that's what I love about this.
Absolutely.
So today is your last day. I know that's how I feel too. Tell me what your work has looked like within the city. What does it look like?
Yeah. Yeah, my work has, like, and this is a fun thing too. I had this mantra for myself that I couldn't spend 50% of my time in my office. If I was spending 50% of my time in my office, that was probably a little too much, because that was where I saw that I was adding capacity to this team, was by just being a new face that people could be kind of neutral about and see people from across, I'm pro, the anti, whatever it is, but, just tell me a little more about that. And I think that was the benefit of me being an outsider in some way. I hope that I gained some trust with other community members, especially those that I was working with more frequently. But I was really just out and talking to people for most of what I was doing. I was also out at community meetings. I was out at city public meetings, like environmental court was quite interesting, historic preservation commission. And I took the opportunity to talk to people who were upset from their outcome. And I said, hey, would you want to grab coffee? So that was actually super effective. And that's something that maybe a city official might not even be able to do, just because of their orientation to the issue. So that's how I felt like I was adding a little bit of capacity. And then separate to that, when I was in my office, I was analyzing a lot of data that exists. We have a couple of interesting platforms that the city uses that, and they could maybe be used differently. And that's what I was doing, is what do we have? What would be useful given what people are saying to me in terms of how the system currently works? And how does the data respond to that? How does the data not respond to that? How can we, if somebody's saying, who's the worst offender? Well, there's a couple of things embedded in there. First of all, what does that mean? But second of all, do we even have the information about violations, or, a property owner who is consistently having calls on their properties across the city? Do we have a way that we could even find who that person is, or who that group of people are? And the answer right now is kind of. And so I took a lot of time to just put these, I felt like a detective a little bit. A detective who was getting coffee and lunch all the time. I was having long lunch meetings. But I think that was what I needed to be doing. At least it feels that way. That's most of what I did, is just being out and then being analytical. And I did the case study that I started mentioning a moment ago, which was kind of grounded in this block by block approach, thinking, okay, if we're going to use this block by block approach, how would this data-driven thing look like if we could do it? So I went on a 9-block radius in Highland that was identified, and it might even be used in the next phase of block by block. And I looked at, with my own eyes, ranking, which isn't necessarily, that's how our brains work, the quality of certain blighted properties. So is this the most blighted? Is this the least blighted? And then ignoring the other ones, looking at trees, looking at where can I not traverse easily on the sidewalk? And I recorded a point for each of those. And I recorded where there were dumping sites, and now it's on a little map. This is not dissimilar to what we're doing block by block, but this was just, okay, what if we gathered the data for it and had it, and we could look at it and then go back and say, here are the worst sidewalks, so if we come into possession of a gift, what would our priorities be? What might our priorities be?
This wasn't a set question, but it's a terrible question, but I'm gonna ask both of you to answer, and you can answer in whatever order you want. But share maybe one of the most enlightening or revealing moments each of you has had in this work so far. Just one experience or one story or one situation where you're like, wow, like I never thought about that before. I never saw this in that way before now.
Sure. This whole experience has been that way. I'm from the New York area. I was just in grad school in Boston, and that was the furthest I've really been away. I studied abroad, and I've lived, but really been entrenched in a community was here. So I would say that whole experience, but I'll answer it a little bit more, honestly. I got the opportunity to ride along with some of our property inspectors as part of this interview process. I mean, where possible, I was just joining people on their day. And I will say that an aha moment, and you know what, I'll even shout out Ms. Lisa Hayes, is just a depth of knowledge, so kind to the community she's interacting with and the residents, and I also reiterate this, she knows every little corner of the district that she's working in. She works so hard. And which was a moment of aha for me, which is what's so special, is like, there's people here who really care, and how can we make the systems and the structures that she's interacting with less frustrating? Because it was hard to see her. She was getting calls from everyone and their mother about issues that weren't even property standards. She was fielding them like a pro, because she is, but then she would come back and have to enter in a violation in a way that wasn't really working for her. So I was thinking, okay, that's one thing that let me uplift what could make this easier for folks like her. People are working really hard here. People really care here, and I think it was put together in my brain when I'm out and seeing that in action.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, I think for me, and I want to talk about it from community development standpoint, we have all these programs with where we can go out and install a ramp or redo your roof or HVAC system. And I know how much we have put in the community, but I think the aha moment for me were the number of homes that I saw with blue tarps. And I couldn't understand. There were resources. Why are there still all these homes with blue tarps, which means that water intrusion, mildew, poor health conditions? So I just asked a gentleman, elderly man, I said, why don't you let us, have you ever applied to the city? Why can't we come out and do your roof? He said, oh, because I don't have homeowners insurance. And that's one of the requirements. That homeowner must have homeowner insurance in order for the city to go in and repair your roof. And I thought, so we need to be working on helping people with the basics. It's not the roof, it's homeowners insurance. And I whispered that to the mayor. And I said, I'm now taking not just pictures of the blue tarps, now I'm asking people, my first question is, apparently if you have a blue tarp, you can't get a roof for whatever reason. But now my questions become, do you have homeowners insurance? And then maybe we can work with the insurance company. So we were doing what we thought was the right thing, and then realized that we weren't even putting a Band-Aid on because we didn't understand they didn't need a Band-Aid. They needed a crutch, and so that was an aha moment for me.
Right.
Fascinating.
There's been tons of those.
Yeah. And I think this is a great segue to our next question, because I was with you on Monday in administrative council meeting where you presented your data to the city council and your case study and what you've learned. Tell us or inform those who are listening more about the materials, the data that you have gathered over these 11 weeks and how we're going to be able to use that information to transform our communities block by block.
And this is where I will take out the old computer. So I didn't do a ton of data gathering myself. Like I wasn't, except for the case study, I wasn't going out and clicking and saying this is here and that's there. Instead, what I was doing is I was actually gathering data on the city to tell us what we have, because I think different departments have different things that actually will be very useful for each other. So the kinds of things that I was helping us identify that we do have are property sale data to start, adjudication data, the length of adjudication data. I don't want to list these things, but I'll list some of them so we get a sense, and then I'll explain why these things are useful, if that's helpful. When we also have associated with each of these properties, like the neighborhoods that they exist in, a property owner is underneath them. Have they been, how many actions have existed against them? So have they gone to environmental court? Has there been a new inspection recently? This is what I mean by an action. What else could be an action? There was a courthouse research. They were notified about something. Then we also have information like calls for service. So when somebody makes a Port City 311 call or a call, I actually don't think other calls get recorded into our data system. So I will say specifically certain types of calls, but those can be attached to a property as well. And so we can start to make associations between our properties that have been adjudicated longer. I didn't do this specifically, but this could be interesting actually. Our properties that are adjudicated longer more likely to have a lot of calls on them. With the calls for service, it was actually quite interesting because I was able to see which properties with code actions, which I just mentioned earlier. So maybe there was a new inspection, maybe they've been to environmental court, which of those properties have calls on them. And it turns out that properties with more code actions tend to have more calls. But when we look at this by neighborhood, there are some neighborhoods that will call a disproportionate amount to the number of properties in their neighborhood. So there's some neighborhoods that are maybe louder than others. And that's actually worth looking into. Are the other neighborhoods afraid of speaking up? Is there a reason maybe they don't get the return? Maybe there's no code action when they call. So gathering data allows us to start asking questions. It's not an answer. We can look at the reasons people call or don't call. And, we're getting 5 calls on a single property in this neighborhood and 1 call about 3 properties in another neighborhood. That could be for a variety of reasons. But starting to get some of that data and hopefully tell folks like Verni that we have this data and we can play with it, is hopefully a good step. I think that covers it. I'm seeing if there's anything else that was interesting. Looking at how many violations were for land, just land, grass lots. That's been a big topic of conversation this summer is people have a lot of feelings about overgrown grass, especially on adjudicated properties that are vacant. And how many violations are on structures? Are they abandoned? Are they vacant? The abandonment and vacancy is often hard to measure. So there's some things that we can't measure. But then that also asks me to ask, why do we not have data for certain things? When we don't have data for certain things, there's likely a system or a process that isn't working properly. If we don't have data about total number of inspections on a property, which at this moment it would actually be really difficult for me to pull that data, that probably means that we need to think about how that system's working.
And is that one of the takeaways or conclusions from this work so far? Is that maybe there's some technology that we need to change out or upgrade or update or explore further? Is that?
I think yes, but I think even more important than identifying what we need to do, I think it's the data that drives. So often we just think, no matter what leadership position we're in, we think we just understand it because from what we see. And I think what Rachel has brought to us is the data informs us. And so if we drive through Moortown, which is where I grew up, and we see a house that's been abandoned, and that didn't happen when I was growing in Moortown. It was in the early 70s, my parents were first-time homeowners, and everybody took great pride in that community. But if you drive through now, and you're like, why are the houses this way? Oh, people just don't, and we give this blanket, people just don't care. But the data informs us. So just as Rachel has shared, has it been reported? Why hasn't it? Who reported? Did people feel like there was no response? So the data tells us not only what we need, i.e. technology, but it also tells us why we need it and how we need to use the information to inform decisions. So just because we cut grass in Moortown doesn't mean that that's what Queensboro needs. They may want housing. So, but we have to let the data, not a single voice, not community development to inform that, but the people who live in those communities have to inform that. But as a collective body, as a governmental entity, block by block, the data needs to inform how we do our work. And without Rachel going to environmental court, talking to those people who didn't get a favorable decision, sitting with a cup of coffee saying, how do you feel? What happens next? We wouldn't have that. We would just have what we thought, why we thought there was a blue tarp. People were just lazy. People couldn't afford it. No, it's because they don't have insurance. So the data has to inform and drive what we do.
So we're going deeper. We had surface, superficial knowledge of the issues and problems, and now we're digging into the roots.
Absolutely, because that's the only way. That's the only way you eradicate a thing. You've got to get to the root cause of it. Right. So. Right.
All right. Well, this next question is my one really long question. So hang in there. All right. So block by block is a result of an intensive planning and leadership effort led by a team of city and community leaders selected by Mayor Arceneaux to participate in the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative, a global program that helps cities design more effective public policy. Shreveport was one of a limited number of U.S. cities chosen for the initiative. And I've read where Mayor Arceneaux said the following. This really struck me and was impactful when I read it. This is Mayor Arceneaux. You'll see the difference in buildings that are repaired or removed, in streets that are brighter, cleaner, and safer, in neighborhoods that people once again feel proud to call home. And so all of that to say, my question for you, Rachel, is what happens once these 11 weeks end, and how do we ensure that this wonderful initiative has an ongoing and long-term effect on this community?
That is the question. And it cannot start or end with my answer because I won't be here tomorrow. So I have ideas as to what can be done, and I have suggestions. But I think that is up to the community, and that is up to the next phase of Block by Block initiative. I can speak a little bit to what I think should be next and what my recommendations are. And we were just talking a lot about the data. And I think that's one thing. I hope that everybody who's interested, especially on the executive committee internal to the Block by Block, will take a look at, there's a lot of data and graphs that have unearthed some preliminary things. And I even just started talking before and realized, that could be an interesting analysis. And I hope to empower our city officials to start to use this tool. It's just a login, and you click some buttons, and you could start to do this on your own. So that's the first thing is the data. Mm-hmm. And also, there's some very basic data system issues for property standards that can be tweaked, and they're needing those. It's a very basic answer to that part of the question, but I hope that gets fixed so that more cases can be seen in environmental court, which is important to ensure that our code enforcement is working the way we need it to. Second thing is, so there was kind of 3 recommendations. So that was the first recommendation. The second recommendation that I've been also shouting from the rooftops, and I think actually the executive team has been shouting from the rooftops, and I hope that my voice is just amplifying it, is that we need more cross-departmental, cross-boundary collaboration within our city. And that's both internal in terms of how we handle problems and how we see them holistically, how we refer, and the data will help with that, by using these data tools where it's not just property standards data, it's not just Department of Public Works data or police data, it's all of our data that informs our work. So that's kind of a mindset change. And that's an example of how collaboration could work. But most importantly, from the community perspective, and this is something that I really hope we see change. And I think for what the mayor said has to happen, is a community member has to be able to go to anyone within the city, an inspector, an officer, or even, and you can disagree with me, but we'll see, I don't think you will, somebody working from a nonprofit on the ground should maybe have a similar training to a property standards inspector or a Department of Public Works. There should be some sort of baseline, if you provision of resources, a basic just being able to field questions or even empower people to say, I actually don't know the answer, but you could go here, and it's a centralized location, so that people feel listened to, and also so that there's no dead end in what we were just discussing with the calls for service, or just speaking to somebody. So that's the collaboration piece. The last piece is a little bit more technical and a little bit more up in the air, and I hope we start to see movement on this, is incentivizing and helping, encouraging people to rehabilitate their homes, which we were just talking about. And there's a lot of systemic issues that make that difficult, but there's also a lot of capital issues that make that difficult. But we have some interesting institutions in the city of Shreveport, like the Shreveport Implementation and Redevelopment Authority, SIRA. Yes. It's a mechanism that we haven't really gotten to using, but will eventually help us start to develop and gain capital. And we'll have that capital. We can seek out new properties, or I've seen my previous job, when I was in school, I helped them with this a little bit, but they had a redevelopment agency that used its 10% of its revenue on micro grants for deferred maintenance for legacy businesses in the city. And so that's something that Shreveport would take on. I've been waiting to actually fix my roof, and I'm this business that's been here for forever, and maybe a little bit of Sears. I've applied for a grant, and I'm using a little bit of Sears money to fix it. So something like that, tax incentives, tax abatements, but also just making it easier for folks to develop there's a lot of knowing who to ask when you're trying to get a permit. That was really clear from my interviews of, I don't know how to do that, or it's taken this long. And some people even self-admitting that you have to kind of know who to ask. I've done it. You have to know who to ask. So cutting down some of that will also be helpful to facilitate more infill housing or, that kind of thing.
Okay.
One of the things that Rachel has left us as an executive team member of the Block by Block group is a starting point in terms of data. I can tell you the Block by Block team our next point of, kind of attack is community engagement. Now that community members are coming out of their homes and feeling safer to share information, it is incumbent upon us to not just give them a survey, but to go and start having these community meetings to say, tell us more. This is what you said in the survey. Tell us more. Inform us. Give us the information so that we can improve your quality of life on your block. So for us, we will begin doing more community engagements in every community in order to deepen this. Like Rachel has already shared, Clean Sweep was just the beginning. It was just look what happens when we all get together on a Saturday morning and we begin to clean up our neighborhood. And then how do we ensure that this happens long term? We all agreed when we started this initiative, this does not live in anybody's term in office. It has to live in a space. We talked about, where does Block by Block live and become this organic thing that is connected to every part of the community? And so what will inform that is how the program kind of evolves organically. And so I think to Rachel's credit and to Rachel's point, if we've not learned anything in this process, we've learned about cross collaboration. If property standards has to understand what public works and community development and economic development and transportation and SPD and the fire department and all the things, how we intersect. And so this is an opportunity to break down those silos. So much happens, when you have a meal together and when you do things together, you learn that, oh, you're cutting grass, Bart. Oh, you're cutting grass, property standards. Oh, you're cutting grass, public works. The community doesn't understand who's doing what. They just want their grass cut. And so we've got to streamline that so we can say, if overgrown grass is your issue, this is who you call, or just one spot to do that. So that cross collaboration allows the community to send its voice to one space that is the repository of information so that the city can respond. Because if you call Jarvis at Public Works and I call Terrence in Property Standards and Rachel calls Shelley at SPAR, now you have 3 departments that have been engaged to cut grass that is outside the city of Shreveport, and none of us can do it. And so it's that cross collaboration. So the data helps us to do this block by block better. It informs, and it's not an opinion, but it's information that the community has given us. And that's how we're going to do this long term. And it's not, and I'm so grateful that Mayor Arceneaux was fortunate enough to introduce it, to bring it to our city, and remains committed to it. But in his own voice, he shared that this is not going to happen overnight, and it should outlive his term or the next person's term. So it has to live in our city. It has to belong to the citizens and to those of us who will be here to make sure that it's executed. So that's how the long-term success, we ensure that.
Blight is a long-term thing that
Absolutely.
an issue, and it's going to take
Long-term.
long-term solutions.
Yeah.
Love that. And I imagine like the story you shared about the homeowner's insurance and the blue tarp. I mean, that kind of data and those kinds of discoveries and findings are going to continue. I mean, the deeper we go into this work, the more we're going to find out what we didn't know that we need to know to attack this in the most effective way.
Absolutely.
Well, you guys, those are my set questions for both of you. If there's anything else that you think we should share or say, by all means, I'm happy for you to do that. I think this is so important. I think it's such a key component of everything we've been doing on this podcast and in these conversations, just trying to diagnose how can we make this community better. So please, just with that.
And I think because this is Rachel's time to share, I wanna let her. The only thing I want to leave is to the citizens in our community. Your voice matters, and for so long, people have not felt like their voice matters. Don't allow anybody to come into your community and shape it and mold it into something that they believe it should be. Let it be what you want it to be. And the only way you can do that, I know people get a lot of pesky surveys, but that survey, that's the data we're talking about. That informs how we do our work and how we serve better as public servants. So that's what I want people to hear. Your voice matters, and it informs how we do the work.
Yeah, I guess related to that is people should feel confident that the city cares. I touched on this a second ago, but I think there's also, we also mentioned the attitude thing. Maybe, I don't know if it was before this, but, I've heard a lot of sentiment about people disliking Shreveport for this reason or the other, but then I don't actually see that super substantiated. I see people that are like super caring, and people, and especially within the city, and the community too. Community members care about each other here. They look after each other. They look outside their window, which you can't say about everywhere. I guess if anything, I would just leave that this is such a special place, and that people are doing the work here. People are trying to figure it out and are doing something about it. Which is so wonderful to see, and it is collaborative. We should keep pushing that, but it has been collaborative, and it will continue to be collaborative. So that's what I'd leave, just because I think that was the most special thing to me, even on a personal level, being here. Yeah, that's what I'd say. I've gotten the chance, just because I take photographs. I was going to say I'm a photographer, but I don't know if I've earned that yet. And I've been taking pictures that are block by blocks. And I think sometimes seeing things through the lens of the camera has shifted my perspective. And I've noticed myself with my camera, especially in Shreveport, is kind of tilting the camera lens up a little bit and not look down at your feet and don't look down at what's on the ground. Maybe we're at block by block and we're picking up trash, so we have to look down on what's on the ground. But look at the faces, look at the gorgeous buildings, the beautiful landscape. I think that people are looking down a little too much, maybe, and that's what I'm seeing. Look up, look at people's hearts, look at people's eyes, look at the sun, the environment here, the homes here, the community centers here, the churches, the synagogues. There's stuff. It's amazing.
I love that.
I think we should end on that. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this.